Hey guys, hope you're well. So this is the day after a terrorist attack that happened in Manchester, an Ariana Grande concert. I'm not actually sure how you pronounce her name. Another tragic terrorist attack. It's going to happen. It's probably just going to go for the usual cycle. People are going to start talking about tragedy. We need to come together. Some people are going to go on rants against Muslims or Muslims, and then you're going to get people who are going to be like, let's not turn this into a Muslim issue, blah blah blah, and it's all about love and their minority. It's going to be the same old rhetoric, same old rhetoric. I give you my views on, again, I've spoken about this before, what I think triggers, what creates environments for terrorists to prosper. I think in my experiences in the Muslim community, what happens is they seem to create an environment that leads to vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities people are going to have to be influenced or tempted by religious extremism. One of the key things I think is the grievance narrative. Marjan Nawaz says there's four key factors to recruiting people to radicalism, and he knows because he used to be an extremist. He used to recruit people. So this is his model: is one, you need a grievance narrative. You need to create one or use one they already have. Identity crisis. They need to be conflicted in who they are, their sense of belonging. A charismatic recruiter, somebody who can really get you to, who builds good rapport, who can build warm feelings towards them, who's attractive. And the fourth one is the narrative itself, the Islamist narrative of this is the way to better the world, this is the way to get revenge for your grievance narrative, these kind of things. So he says those are four factors. And when it comes to the Muslim community, in my experience, one of the things it does extremely well, unfortunately, is foster a grievance narrative. When I was in the Muslim community, conspiracy theories were heavily promoted. The idea that the Illuminati, the Jews, and the New World Order were behind an ideological military attacks on Islam were huge. They were absolutely huge. And people used to pass on documentaries and YouTube videos about these kind of things. So this idea that Muslims are being persecuted and they were coming and taking our land and Muslims are under attack and all these kind of things was really front and center stage. And what I would notice is there was always a skepticism whenever there was some kind of terrorist attack by Muslims. The idea that ISIS. So what would tend to happen was. And this is true in many communities. Again, so this is not some isolated psychology to do with Islam. In my experience, is that when some member of their particular demographic or community, or their tribe, their in-group does something, there's like excuses. But when somebody outside the group does it, it's condemnable. They were completely under their own control. They had the complete autonomy. Outside influence doesn't matter. They did it. They're terrible people for going into Iraq and doing that and blah blah blah. So regardless if you agree with those things, I'm just saying the narrative. But when inside the community, maybe maybe they were brainwashed. Maybe there's outside influences like Illuminati or blah 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 blah, or CIA, whatever. Maybe they know what led them to this path. I try to understand. So there's a softening to people, the in group and the out group. As I said, this is not just exclusive to Muslim psychology. I've seen this of every group you can ever imagine that sees the world in group and out group on whatever basis, right? So, in my experience, what it tends to do is it creates a grievance and it creates tribalism, and grievances and tribalism foster, my experience, the revenge mindset, the desire to readdress grievances by committing attacks on other human beings, and that can be on a very small scale in our mind. When somebody's done something bad to us, a lot of us, I have this, you start imagining going back and readdressing the wrong, and readdressing the wrong might be wanting the other person to feel as humiliated as you did, or as scared as you did, or to commit an act of violence if you were committed violence against, and that's revenge. And on a small scale, you can see in our own minds how that can play out in a larger scale. So if you have a grievance narrative, one of the things most people want when they have a grievance narrative is revenge. And they might call it retribution, but in my opinion, a lot of it is just, or defense, but in my opinion, a lot of it is normally just disguised revenge, just a disguised revenge fantasy, as opposed to the teachings of people like, in my opinion, the Buddha and Jesus, which is to forgive your enemy. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be passive and you can't protect yourself, but there's a difference between protection and revenge. Revenge is, you harbour a grudge and then years later you're plotting at some kind of attack against the person. Protection is normally in the moment. It's normally something in response to an immediate threat. So if somebody's immediately threatening you, then you say, okay, that's not okay. Don't talk to me like that. Don't do that, or it's not okay to do this to our country. But it's not plotting. It's not something's happened, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and then you're plotting to commit the atrocities in equivalent or even more 5 years later. That's revenge. But anyway, so yeah, as I said, it tends to breed a grievance and tribalist narrative, and I think that's a really big problem. Which, in my experience, when I was a Muslim and it might have changed, I don't really think that's addressed. And in my opinion, that leaves people vulnerable to at least sympathy with terrorist attackers. But I just want to say at this juncture, before people start saying, some people who are non-Muslims might be like, yeah, see, this is how these Muslim communities are. The majority of victims of Islamic extremism are Muslims themselves. The most, unfortunately, they are. So, but in my opinion, I think there's a level of ignorance, because a lot of Muslims don't like modern noirs, and I think it gives a brilliant model for understanding extremism, and that model can be applied to any extremist ideology. And because they reject that kind of thing, they don't really take into account the power of grievance narratives and the power of tribalism to leave people vulnerable. Another thing is that is marginalization. When people see themselves as marginalized by a society or their community, their demographic, then that seems to leave them more open and vulnerable to extremism, to being recruited. What I was reading one time was that converts are more disproportionately more likely to be extremists, to become extremists, than born Muslims. And one of the reasons, there's two reasons hypothesized from memory, was that there's a lot of prison converts and a lot of prison people, which I'll come on to next time, who tend to have a lot of anger, tend to be very angry people. And the second one, which is I'm going to focus on now, is the notion that a lot of converts are marginalized by the mainstream community. I experienced this when I was a convert, and I also experienced what I'm about to say, is they're marginalized within the Islamic community. Because in the UK, and from my experience, this is true all around the world, for whatever reason, Muslim communities tend to be very ethno-religious. Mainly, they border themselves off based on the basis of a combination of ethnicity and religion. So if you're a particular ethnicity, they create communities catering to that ethnicity within a religious context, and anybody outside of that ethnicity has a really hard time fitting in or being accepted, and can even experience racism. And that, as I said, that's true in Indo-Pakistani community, that's true in the Indo-Pak community, that's true in Arab community, that's true in Somali communities in the UK, and what I've seen is true all around the world. It's just exactly the same thing. I don't know why Islamic communities tend to foster this kind of mentality, but it does, from what I can gather. And that can lead to a marginalization, and that marginalization leaves people susceptible to people who come along and say, hey, I accept you. We don't care about race, we don't care about creed, we don't care about race, we don't care about ethnicity. Everybody's welcome here. So those charismatic recruiters who don't divide people up on the basis of ethnicity or race tend to be very welcoming and attractive. And when you have a central marginalization, you see other people as an other. You see yourself as an outsider, which can lead to you in your thought process dehumanizing people, which can lead to be more susceptible to extremist ideology, in my opinion. This is my speculation. Okay, so on to the next one is anger. Anger is, I agree with a lady called Carla McLaren, who is is she a psychologist? Or she's somebody who I consider an expert in emotions. And one of the things she says about anger, what anger is healthy anger, just boundaries. It's not aggression. It's you don't even feel threatened by somebody. Somebody who has healthy anger, you don't feel threatened by them, but you just have a sense that it's not okay for me to talk crap to this person. Talk like crap to this person. They'd stand up to me. They'd say something if I tried to hit them or touch them sexually inappropriately, or I said something to them. I tried to verbally abuse them. They would say something or stand up to me or do something. And it's not threatening. It's not like, oh, this person might go off at any second. It's just a healthy kind of, this person respects themselves and is willing to be assertive. That's healthy anger. Unhealthy anger or rage is that kind of desire to be aggressive, is to destroy, is that this person might go off at any moment. And in my experience, as I said, people who tend to go to prison tend to have problems with anger and rage. A lot of them tend to be like that. So when you convert, when people from prison convert, they tend to carry that around with them. And as well as I've seen in the Muslim community, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of fostering of anger towards the other. As I said, I go back to Illuminati, Jewish conspiracy theories and things like this, and non-Muslims. There tends to be a lot of anger. As again, not everyone who's angry is going to become an extremist or anything like this. I'm not saying that. But this goes on to the final point I'm going to make. And this is not an extensive or exhaustive list of the reasons why extremism occurs. This is just one particular viewpoint, one particular, at this moment in time, these are the factors that I'm just emphasizing. And one of the saddest things I think about Islam, and I might do another video on this, is that Islam emphasizes actions over virtues. It emphasizes doctrine over virtues. And it's not the only religion that does this. Unfortunately, mainstream Christianity does this, but for whatever reason, it does tend to foster extremists like Islam does for different reasons. And because one of the problems with emphasizing actions is actions don't necessarily change the person, doesn't lead to internal transformation, doesn't lead to character change. You can carry out actions for multiple reasons. There's a great video online, I really recommend you watch it, on YouTube, called Universal Categories of Love, and it's about a theologian and mystic called Emanuel Swedenborg. And even if you don't believe in the supernatural or anything like this, you can use it as a completely secular model. And he was and in the video makes the point that you can do exactly the same action and be motivated by completely different reasons. You can be motivated by self-importance, wanting to look good, wanting people to praise you. You can be motivated by a love of money. You want to get money for reaction, or you want to get money so you can buy things or do things, or just large amounts of money. Or it can be motivated by love, like a genuine act of you love what you're doing. You love the benefit it can bring to people. It's that kind of loving kindness. So there's different reasons, different motivations for doing an action, and that's one of the problems with Islam. Is the 5 pillars of faith are not virtues. They're not modesty. They're not patience. They're not compassion. They're not generosity. They're not forgiveness. Those are not the 5 pillars, and that's a really strong term. The 5 pillars. That's a really strong thing to say. That's like the foundation of the religion. Our actions, our prayer, our fasting. Or what else is there? Fasting during the month of Ramadan. I've actually forgot a few of them at this moment in time, but you can look at them yourselves, Google them. They're all actions. They're all external things. As long as you fulfill the external criteria, then you're doing it. And like I said, that you can do it for all kinds of reasons. One of the things I loved about Sikhism, and in the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the book of the holy book of the Sikhs, and they actually call it a guru. They call it a living teacher. And in the Guru Granth Sahib, it says to Muslims, which I think is beautiful advice, is make modesty your prayer, make compassion your fasting. It talks about virtues. It says instead of having actions, make the development of virtues, make a development of your character, internal change, the primary. And in my opinion, in Islam, that's not really focused on. The internal aspect is not really focused on. I'm actually going to do a video about that. I just decided, but hopefully this video as well is interesting. So those things combined, what I'm talking about, is why I think a lot of the Muslim community is really, it leads to a vulnerability to extremist ideology. When you have things like the grievance narrative, tribalism, you have the in-group and out-group, you have the anger that it fosters. When you have all these factors, and you have the emphasis on actions. Actions are what determine your faith. Actions are what determine your piety. Right? Actions are what determine your devotion to God. Or actions, not your virtues, not development of virtues, not character change. That's not what That's what determines it. When you have those emphasis, then I think that can lead to a place where it's easy to develop the kind of psychology, or not easy. It leaves you vulnerable to developing the psychology that leads to extremism. It leaves you vulnerable to developing a kind of culture that can lead to extremism. And I think until those things are addressed, I think there's going to be a perpetual problem with extremism within Muslim communities. I think until they really change the culture within Muslim communities, it's going to be this ongoing problem. Yeah, so anyway guys, I hope you're well, and I hope that's informative to some people. And if there are any Muslims watching want to disagree, please let me know why you disagree with some of the things I said. Okay, so take care.